How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Set 6, and today we're going to begin our journey through Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, breaking down the main story beats and important side bits, chapter by chapter. We're going to do that for each chapter, so there's going to be 14 of them by the end of it, and hopefully it'll be a nice little catalogue of all of the important bits in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. There are going to be full spoilers for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth in this series, as well as Final Fantasy VII Remake, the compilation, the OG, everything. So we're going to be looking at everything in full context, but if there's anything that you're avoiding spoilers for, maybe wait until you've played those games. Also, as a really quick side note, and something that I've not done on the channel before, I'm currently doing a sponsorship over on Twitch to try and raise some money to replace this PC, which is, it's kind of dying. It's slowed down the speed that I can make videos, so I'm trying to replace it. The game that we're checking out is Ant Legion for the Swarm on mobile. So far it's going really well over on Twitch, but I could always do with more people jumping in and checking out the game. So make sure you check out the comments in the video description. There'll be a link where you can download the game and all the details of it, and you will be helping out massively and supporting the channel. Anyway, enough of that. Don't forget, like the video, subscribe for future content, and let's dive into Chapter 1 of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So, the game starts, and we see the massive tornado encircling the Shinra building. Basically what we're seeing here is the scenes from the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, but rather than being from the perspective of the characters, we're seeing it from kind of an outside perspective, almost a Shinra perspective, and seeing what goes on. We see the giant pulse kind of going through the tornado, we see the tornado absolutely ripping through the city, and it makes certain parts of the city look reminiscent to what we see in the final fight with Sephiroth, when he's kind of destroying Midgar around us and we're fighting. Certain sections of the city do end up looking like that. Skip forward a little bit and we've got a report of the morning after going through the devastation, and as I was saying a minute ago, there is a lot of it. Sector 0, Sector 1 and Sector 2 have absolutely been destroyed, and seemingly half of the Shinra building has just kind of been chopped off and kind of left a few hundred meters away. And again, very reminiscent of the Shinra building that we see during the fight with Sephiroth at the end of Remake. And it also brings up a question for me. So I have said this already, spoilers for the whole game, but here we go. So when we get to the end of Rebirth, we have that moment where Zack goes back to the Shinra building. But how does he go back to the Shinra building looking at the state of everything right here? It's kind of weird. Everything about the world that we see kind of seems very similar and very bang on. There are slight nuanced differences and things like that. But this is a bit of a weird one for me. And I did say when I was playing the game, it seemed like there was a lack of details in that moment later on in the game. And that already had me asking questions, but then seeing the Shinra building in this state, it makes me wonder, where does Zack actually go in that moment? Something to think about for later. Anyway, moving on. We get the footage of the tornadoes ripping through the city, and we hear Shinra covering it up as weather warfare from Avalanche, but maybe with the involvement of Wutai, which begins that thread of working towards a war with Wutai, which is something that we see come up over and over again as we go through the game. And in the same shot where we see the Shinra building, we also see a shot of Terrier Stamp, which tells us which world we're in, and this is consistent with what we saw at the end of Remake. We expected this to be the Terrier timeline, and it is, and we just get a good shot of the devastation across Midgar. I also feel like the Shinra building being kind of split in half like that, could be symbolic of the way that the worlds have kind of been split and how that kind of goes on. I just think it's just some imagery to kind of put us in mind of that, maybe. After that, the camera pans to Zack and we see him carrying Cloud towards Midgar, a shot that we've seen many times in a lot of the trailers. The white feather just floating down towards the two of them, and I believe that this is symbolic of the connection between Angeal, Zack and Cloud, and this living legacy kind of thing that they carry forwards throughout the world of Final Fantasy VII. It makes sense, it's a nice shot. Now Zack makes his way into Midgar, finds himself in Sector 5 looking up at the big screen, and we hear that there is one suspect unaccounted for, an ex-soldier with a Buster Sword, which clearly means Cloud, but that Cloud isn't here anymore, and has apparently been replaced by the Cloud that Zack carries with him, So it's like Cloud was removed from this world because there was another Cloud there. There's an interesting mechanic possibly going on here that we don't quite understand. Maybe there's more to this moment where Cloud seems to have been replaced in a different way to everybody else, because Cloud was with the party at the end of the highway. So for him to disappear from there and be with Zack only, that's weird, because it doesn't happen to anybody else. So yeah, there's more that we need to learn about this. It could just be quite simply the live stream, when this world was created, detected that Cloud was there and not there. There was a bit of confusion. I don't know. Let me know what you're thinking in the comments below. This series that we're doing is definitely going to spawn a lot of videos where we dive into a particular topic, and this could be one of the first ones. So we'll keep going for now, but there's definitely something a bit odd about that. Maybe it's one of those where they've just done it and gone, don't think about it, and we shouldn't think about it. Maybe it's one of them. We'll see though. We see the other dead party members being loaded into helicopters, which then compels Zack to leave Cloud with Kyrie and go on the chase. Now, again, we have a duplicate of Kyrie here that hasn't gone out into the world, setting up early that people can be duplicated between worlds, but I don't know what this suggests then about Kyrie. And it's the same with Johnny later on in the game. Like, we see both of them outside of Midgar, so they've left Midgar in some capacity. And it makes it more of a case that this Midgar has been potentially built, like it is a branch off from the world that we were in, the Beagle world, but it seems to have been changed and altered in some way by the memories of the people going into it. It's kind of doing both. It's kind of doing both. So people being duplicated across the worlds is an interesting thing that we're going to look into at some point, because I think we could maybe find some answers there. Anyway, rabbit hole, moving on. Zack gives chase after the helicopter, and we cut to a shot of Red 13 waking up and attacking the pilot of the helicopter that he's in, which forces it to crash and leaves Aerith open to be rescued. Is this possibly something? Is this the Omni Aerith waking Red 13 up and compelling him to attack the helicopter pilot in an effort to make sure that Aerith is free and able to be rescued by Zack? Or is it just as simple as Red 13 woke up and was super pissed and decided to bite someone? I kinda think it's the latter, if I'm being honest. I think Red was just pissed and just bit him. Like, I feel like it's that, but again, let me know what you're thinking in the comments below. You should just do that for everything, but we'll carry on. We eventually catch up to them and Zack swoops in, saves Aerith, and then we get a scene where she seems to kind of fall limp in his arms and the white materia tumbles from her hair in the same manner that it does in another scene, and it's very, very strongly alluding to the potential fate of Aerith. It's very suggestive of that, and yeah, the game does a lot of this. It kind of drops imagery on you, and there's more of it to come, trust me. But after that, we immediately flip over to the Nibelheim flashback, at the Calm flashback, with Cloud, Sephiroth, and the other troops that they brought with them heading out to Nibelheim to investigate reports of monsters. The usual stuff that we get in the OG is pretty much untouched in these scenes. It pretty much pans out exactly as you would expect it to. We get to fight a couple of dragon-type enemies, we get to control Sephiroth, which is glorious, but then we also get a little bit more imagery that's suggestive of certain events later on in the game. The moment when Sephiroth attacks the dragon, but then jumps up into the air and stabs down onto it. Again, the game is peppered with imagery like this. We eventually reach Nibelheim, and the events proceed again as they do in the OG, with Sephiroth lamenting his lack of a home, Cloud touring the tome on his return, and like, just to speak on Nibelheim a little bit, it has been expanded a fair bit. There are more places, there are more people, there are more little tiny events like the exercise group that ties back into some of the side stories that we've had for Final Fantasy VII, and it's just a nice little place to be. You can stand around, you can listen to the conversation that's going on. Everyone's mega excited that Sephiroth's come along, and one thing I will say, I'm not diving into all of the lore and the mythology references and things like that in this video. I know that M J Gallagher is doing a series with KupoCon at the moment where he is diving into all the little lore bits, all the Easter eggs, all the mythology, you know, looking at that sort of stuff. So go and check that video out if you are looking for those sort of things as well. This series I'm doing is going to be more major plot beats, and trying to find suggestions of where the story may be going after Rebirth. So yeah, make sure you go check out that video. I'll make sure the link's in the description as well. Get involved. It's a great video, and MJ's a great guy, so do the thing. Anyway, we get to meet Cloud's mother, Claudia, and we learn about his dad, not Glenn, dying when Cloud was very young, and how his mother had raised him alone. And it's quite fun how when Claudia opens the door, she doesn't recognise Cloud immediately. She says, "Is that you?" And this is because, in reality, when Cloud knocks on that door, he's wearing the Shinra Grunt uniform, because obviously not a soldier. She grabs him, drags him inside to get a good look at him, makes another comment about what he's wearing, and then says, "You soldiers do clean up nice." And as she says this, we get that flicker of Jenova, of a memory being kind of suppressed and tweaked on the fly by Jenova. And this is something that we're going to start seeing consistently throughout the game now, because Cloud's a mess. We all know Cloud's a mess. From this point, the whole scene is bits and pieces, with Cloud's memory kind of being rewritten and corrected, just so that he can maintain his delusion while he tells this story to the party. Cloud then kind of cuts the memory short, probably because there was a bit too much work going on behind the scenes, and it was easier to just stop the memory. After cutting the memory short, Cloud then leaves and climbs up the water tower so that he can relive some memories. Now, one thing to note here is that when he sits down on the water tower, he doesn't remove his sword like he does later on in the game. And this is because, in reality, even though in the memory he is a soldier, in reality he's just a Shinra Grunt in a uniform and isn't carrying a sword. So again, another little hint. We hit Tifa's house, we play some piano, we steal some underwear, and then we can kind of go around and tour the village a little bit more, but eventually we go to the inn. When we get to the inn, we bump into Zangan, who squeezes our muscles a little bit. It's pretty weird. It's pretty weird. But he talks about his student Tifa, so we get a little bit more additional story for Tifa and the training that she's doing. But eventually we step away from the strange man who squeezes muscles, and we go upstairs and speak to Sephiroth, who could swear he's been here before. The following morning, things continue to proceed as normal. The group gets joined by Tifa, who's going to guide us. Not many people are happy about that, but Tifa's loving it. We do the posing for the photo thing, and then we head up the trail towards the Nebel reactor. And we're going to bypass most of this because it's pretty much the tutorial for the game. Just running through, climbing things, killing things, doing all the bits. Eventually, though, we reach the bridge. And a lightning strike hits the bridge, we fall into the water below, and everyone is safe except for one Shinra Grunt, who's swept down the river and disappears. Now this is something that will come back much later on, and it is a great addition given the tweaks to the whole Cloud's false memories kind of story that's going on. I love this is a good way to tweak it. The group continues to head up towards the reactor, and eventually we reach the giant Mako spring, and we get the scene where Sephiroth explains magic to everybody, and where Tifa talks about how Mako depletion might not be the best thing for the planet going forwards, and she's not wrong. And then we continue on a little bit further, we get the Materia Keeper fight, which is like the big set piece from the demo. Great fight, but then eventually we reach the reactor. Tifa gets left outside with Cloud, while Cloud and Sephiroth go inside to see. It gets confusing, doesn't it? But Cloud and Sephiroth talk about how it's surprising that the reactor isn't running at a reduced output. They kind of answer the question why themselves by talking about how the reactor is directly under research and development rather than the urban development team. So yeah, we kind of know what's going on there. Sephiroth almost certainly knows what's going on there. And we head down into the depths of the reactor, reaching the main room, and just before we go in, it's pretty cool. Sephiroth stops Cloud and says, maybe you want to say a few words to your sword first. Obviously, a hint that this isn't Cloud, but we carry on, we head inside, and this is where all the fun stuff ends. We head into the room with all the Mako pods, and the scene pans out exactly as we know it all to pan out, no Genesis, with Sephiroth and Cloud fixing the issue with the valve before Sephiroth is filled with questions regarding his mother, Jenova, and his origins. Now as this happens, we get a lot of familiar imagery, flashes of important images, the pods, Jenova, the Machanoid, all with that slightly familiar static noise in the background. It isn't identical to what we see with Cloud when he has Jenova visions, but it's close-ish. And I believe that it's this moment where the aspects of Jenova within Sephiroth's mind really kick into overdrive, like, oh, he's got doubts. And this is the thing with Jenova, it kind of latches onto those people that have got like low self-confidence, low willpower, doubts, things like that. This is why it doesn't affect Zack, because Zack has none of that and just goes for it. So Jenova's pretty ineffective against Zack, whereas with Cloud, who's full of doubts and full of misgivings, it consumes him. Not completely, but nearly. And the same thing is happening with Sephiroth here. And we'll see it continue on later, but as the scene continues, Sephiroth eventually proceeds to lock himself in the Shinra Manor's basement, and he begins to read about the horrors that took place here over the years. And as we're heading there to catch up with Sephiroth, we hear a lot of the villagers talking about how Sephiroth didn't look right, he didn't look well as he went to the manor, which to me is a further suggestion that Sephiroth's kind of going through some Jenova-triggered turmoil right now. And maybe there are physiological changes as well as psychological changes. We see with the Black Cloaks, they go through physiological changes as Jenova takes a deeper grip on them as a person. So maybe Sephiroth is going through some stuff right now. I mean, it makes sense, but the villagers saying that kind of suggests it to me that he's in a bad way. And if we could have stopped him before he got to the manor, maybe we could have stopped this from happening. But as we get to the manor and we head down into the basement, we find out that Sephiroth has been reading about Jenova and the Jenova project, with him telling Cloud to leave him alone, leave me be, while he reads and reads and reads. And genuinely, if we could have stopped Sephiroth at this point, I think he's salvageable. But after this, when we head back, we find out that Sephiroth has learned pretty much everything. He's learned about the project and his creation. And again, when Sephiroth is explaining this to Cloud, and he's kind of telling him about Jenova and how he was created, you get that flicker of Jenova and that green overlay. And this is Jenova finally locking in. This is the end of normal Sephiroth at this point. That's it. It's over. This is the point where he has changed irrevocably, in my mind. And from here, he acts in a single-minded manner about reclaiming his mother. The Cloud tries to stop him, gets thrown across the room, and in this moment we get another flicker, and I'm not too sure on this one. I don't know if, like the previous two that we've seen I think were Sephiroth related, whereas this one feels like it's Cloud related, similar to when he went to see his mother and the memory adjusted itself. Cloud technically isn't there in this moment. So maybe Jenova kicks in to create the feeling of Sephiroth throwing him in order to solidify that memory to Cloud, that false memory. Either way, we go outside after recovering and everything is on fire. Everything. And after slow walking through the entire segment, which is something I hate, we reach Cloud's home, with Cloud lay on the ground in front of it, giving us another early hint at the true events that go down here. And the same thing happens again when we get the explosion, like the house explodes, Cloud's thrown back, and for a moment he sees himself in his Shinra uniform rather than in his soldier's uniform. We can only see his hands obviously, but it is another early hint. Sephiroth proceeds to continue slaughtering everybody and then heads up to the reactor, but there is one moment where he stood in the flames and he seems to say something to Cloud. I can't really make it out. Has anyone got a clue what he's saying here? It almost feels like he's saying please to Cloud, but he isn't. Why would he be? So, I don't know. Let me know what you think. Is he saying something or is it just a grimace? I don't know. Let me know. But anyway, when we reach the reactor, things continue to pan out as they do in the OG. Tifa's mourning her father who's been killed by Sephiroth. She then picks up the sword, charges after Sephiroth, gets cut down by Sephiroth, and then Cloud helps Tifa before he goes in to confront Sephiroth. Sephiroth's speech is very much the same as the OG. His delusion at this point has been cranked up to 1,000, and like I say, he's gone at this point. That's it, Sephiroth's gone. And the scene ends in the same way it does in the OG, with one slight change. And this is like, in the OG, the scene flicks just between Cloud and Sephiroth. Cloud and Sephiroth, you get the you know, just flicking between the two shots. Whereas in this version, it adds Jenova into it as well. Every so often it flicks to a shot of Jenova, and it symbolises her position in the relationship and the bond between Cloud and Sephiroth, because she's got her claws in both of them, Not during the flashback, of course, but like in reality, Cloud, who's telling the story, Jenova's got a claws into him, and same with Sephiroth. So, yeah, it's a nice little addition to the flicking between the two characters. I enjoyed that. But then the flashback ends, and Cloud tells everyone that he can't remember what happens next. Everyone's confused by the whole situation, because it is a very confusing situation. We hear about how Shinra tried to spin it using propaganda afterwards, first saying that Sephiroth was just missing and then that he was killed in action. Cloud says that we know he's alive now though, but Aerith corrects him to say that he's not so much alive, but around. Which ties in not only with the whole remake thing, but even with the OG, because Sephiroth does technically die back then. It's just that his consciousness persists, whereas his physical body is dead. Tifa then ponders why he's back now after 5 years, and this kind of matches the questions about Cloud, which forces Jenova to kind of kick in and push Cloud to talk about Sephiroth wanting to finish what he started. And is that supposed to suggest that maybe Cloud is trying to finish what he started? Weird moment. But everyone heads to bed, and then we cut to a scene with Tifa and Aerith where they're just talking about things, and two interesting things happen. So we're talking about where Cloud's been for the last 5 years, which again, like I say, that question that she asked about Sephiroth would also apply to Cloud as well. And the first interesting thing is that Aerith suggests that she might have known at one point, but all of that has been taken from her. And this for me is a symptom of her connection with Omni Aerith, or the Aerith with memories closest to the future, being separated when she left Midgar. But this is something we'll come back to in about 12 chapters. Yeah, we'll come back to this in about 12 chapters. But for now, those memories are gone, and Aerith has no more connection with the future than anybody else. But the other interesting thing is Tifa flat out saying that Cloud was not there 5 years ago. Now the conversation continues after this point, with Aerith becoming much more interested at that point, like, oh wait, what? But we don't get to hear that conversation at this point. But this feels like a pretty big deviation from the OG in my mind, because this doesn't happen, there's no conversation about this at any point, and eventually it seems to lead to Tifa coming to see Cloud. Cloud heads out for a bit of a conversation with Tifa on the roof, but as he heads past the stairs, he sees Sephiroth, and he tells Cloud outright, like, I killed her? Who's this? You know that I killed her 5 years ago, so who's this? What's going on, Cloud? What's going on, buddy? And this is a journey that Sephiroth's beginning, where he's trying to drive a wedge in between Tifa and Cloud. He knows that he needs to separate Cloud from both Aerith and Tifa. He needs to separate him from both of them, because they are both massively important support structures for Cloud, especially in the state that he's in. And if you can get rid of them, he's got Cloud to himself. So that's kind of where Sephiroth's at, and this is something that he tries all the way through the game. This is just the beginning of it. And I also don't think he's done going forwards as well. I think we see more of this in part 3. I think he intensifies this in part 3. But anyway, we'll carry on. You can also pop downstairs and speak to Broden, who's like the innkeep here. And they suggest that we don't look well. Maybe an old war wound is acting up. And he tells us that he used to work for the company and he isn't feeling too good. And this just immediately made me think of two things. The first is geostigma, the old war wound, because we see Cloud in Remake kind of reach for the area where the geostigma was, although it hasn't happened yet. We see him reaching for it, and maybe people that are kind of slipping down the slope of Jenova are more perceptive to things like that, because the second thing that I immediately thought is Broden is definitely going to be wearing a black cloak later on, and if you've played the game, you know that he is. So, yeah, bad times for Broden. Bad times for Broden. But we move on though. We hit the roof, and the scene pans out exactly how Sephiroth wants, with Cloud doubting Tifa, Tifa reacting to this in a very negative manner, which 100% makes sense. Like, what do you mean I died? What? So I 100% get that from Tifa, and she challenges where Cloud has been for 5 years directly to Cloud, and Cloud's like, well, I don't think I can divulge that information. You know, playing the confidential soldier business card. And yeah, that was again another Jenova triggered thing. We've not got an explanation for this, so give no explanation. But then Tifa storms off. So we can see that there's a lot of different stuff going on here, but it all feeds into the same sort of ideas. Separate Cloud from Tifa and Aerith. That is Sephiroth's goal, so he's going to do everything that he can to make that happen. We head downstairs, And we get one more moment where Tifa kind of suggests it might not have been the best idea us two meeting each other again. And the two part from each other on pretty cold terms, pretty frosty terms. But this is something that we can resolve as we go forwards. And just before Cloud goes to sleep, he gets chastised by Barrett, basically saying, we really don't need you two having drama with each other. We've got enough going on. And he's right. He's 100% right. But that brings us to the end of Chapter 1. So there's a lot of cool stuff that happens in Chapter 1. There's a lot of stuff like, most of it's expected, but there are some little subtle hints towards things, like the state of Midgar at the start of the chapter, where we see like the Shinra building cut in half. That kind of leaves me with a few questions, not only about the ending of Remake, but about where Zack goes to at the end of Rebirth. It definitely leaves me with a few questions there. The fact that Tifa's directly discussing with Aerith the fact that Cloud wasn't there 5 years ago, very interesting stuff, and we'll see how Tifa deals with that going forwards throughout the game. And then Sephiroth just getting in there early. As I expected, I completely believe that he'd start messing around with the calm flashback. He actually didn't jump into the flashback proper like I expected, but within minutes of the flashback ending, he's there. And he's doing his shit. So, yeah, big fan of that. Big fan of the chapter. It's a great chapter. It's a great opening for the game. It kind of opened down most of us expected, because most of us were saying it'll open with the calm flashback. But it didn't, because we got the Zack thing first. But it did. So, all in all, good chapter. I loved it. Let me know what you're thinking in the comments below. My PC will hopefully let me get part 2 rendered in the next couple of days, and we will talk about chapter 2 of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Let me know if I went into too much detail, maybe, with certain things. I don't know if these are going to be too long, if I need to shorten them a bit. Let me know what your thoughts are on the video, you know, for the series going forwards. But thank you very much for watching. Make sure you like the video and subscribe for future content, because we've got lots of it coming, and there's already lots of content out there. Check out the channel, there might be stuff that you've missed. But more importantly than all of that, have a great day.